Hey everyone, today we're talking about landmines. More specifically, end crystals. Overall, I've been generally pretty dissatisfied with all the landmines that I designed, as well as the ones I saw other people design, because usually they suffered from a variety of problems. If we take the basic one, there's obviously a ton of problems, like number one, I can't even kill this chicken here. Number two, you have 4 seconds to run away, you can hear it. And number three, the pressure plate is really noticeable. Obviously, you have some crude solutions to some of these problems, like this one, which is very much lethal enough to kill whoever you're trying to kill. But the problem is it's once again too noticeable and also a little bit too crude, because what if you're just trying to kill someone without necessarily deleting their items or anything? Oftentimes, the thing that makes most mines crude is the fact that you load way more explosives into them than necessary, like that one over there. But the thing that plagues most singular explosive mines is the fact that, based on the way that the game is coded, no matter how nuclear your explosion is, as long as there's something between you and the explosive, you're not going to take any damage at all. And the thing that's usually the case with the landmines is that the floor is between you and the explosive, making every single explosive mine virtually useless. The other great problem with your average landmine is that even with applicable armor for the average day player, and an adequate distance away from your explosive, even with nothing between you and the explosive, you're still not going to die from it. It only dealt about like half of my health, and that's how deep you'd probably bury your TNT anyways. So what's the deal? How do you make a good landmine? Okay, so I think it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of problems that need solving. So let's get right into all the things and parameters that we want our newer mines to have. Number one, atrociously hidden. Those two mines use pressure plates, which you're obviously not going to step on if you know what's good for you. So let's start with a better solution. I think I'm going to use sculk sensors. Even though we've had pufferfish detectors for a little while, sculk sensors are a little more convenient. Next, too slow. TNT has a 4-second delay time, which is more than enough time to get out of its blast radius, especially since it's definitely pretty loud and you can hear it and run away in time. Next, needlessly explosive with this crater that's more than blast worthy enough to kill anybody as well as destroy all their items, which might not be what you want, because maybe you're just looking to harmlessly prank someone and they just get their stuff back by running over and picking it up. Lastly, some stuff are not explosive enough. If you bury your explosive and there's ground between you and the target, that's just not going to work with a single explosive, so you definitely need to find some other solution to that. And all of these problems led me to the perfect explosive, which happened to be the End Crystal. The reason why it's often overlooked as an explosive is because, well, it's kind of pretty violent for most cases, as well as being horrendously inconvenient due to its size and volatility being destroyed by any single projectile, as well as any of itself in a 15-meter radius, making it pretty worthless. But I'll quickly go over why this happens to be super convenient for the task that we're applying it to. So let me talk about how the End Crystal addresses every single problem. Number one, it's definitely not atrociously hidden, because we can actually just use a sculk sensor for that. So that's not really an End Crystal solution, but you know it's 1.19. I can do whatever I want. Number two, it's often too slow, and this problem is immediately solved because any End Crystal can be immediately detonated by simply just throwing a projectile at it, with a dispenser of course. The next thing is it's needlessly destructive. This is not the case, because even if I wanted to load a trillion End Crystals into there, I can't, because End Crystals within like 15 meters of each other just delete each other with no explosion. So we can't compound the explosives. And that brings us to the last problem. Not destructive enough. And we can divide this into two parts. Number one, explosive power. End Crystals have it all. They can instantly execute any player in full Prot 4 Netherite with Elytra, which is basically everybody's day-to-day gear. But problem number two is we need to expose the explosive directly to the player. And this is actually really convenient for the End Crystal, because since it's such a large entity, if it's already clipping into blocks, then we can just simply push them through the blocks as if they weren't there, allowing us to pretty easily expose our End Crystal to the player. But if we're looking for a ground landmine, we have a lot of things to consider. What height should we put the End Crystal at? And if we put it at this height, this is actually no good, because we can see that it pokes out of the ground every now and then, making it a problem for that first problem I discussed, and people will certainly notice it if they're particularly observant. One block lower is also a problem, because suddenly it's too low to be already clipping into these blocks, meaning that we can't actually push it upwards, making it very difficult to get through the ground. We need to remove all 9 of these blocks before we can even think of raising the end crystal. Lastly, this brings us to the final solution, 1.5 blocks of height. If we have it at this perfect height and then lay over the surface, not only does it not poke out of the ground at all, but also it's already clipping into these blocks, meaning if we wanted to, we can start elevating it further. Meaning that of exactly 2.5 blocks beneath the surface is the perfect height for our end crystals. Okay, so let's get into the piston layout. Number 1, before anything even happens, the mine is already set up such that the end crystal is at this height, which kind of already clips into the floor, which is perfect for what we're doing. Next, we're going to retract this block. This piston's actually going to get pulled to the side and make way for the dispenser that shoots at it, which is going to detonate the bomb, but that'll happen later. But for now, we're just going to retract it, which due to some weird piston glitchiness causes it to move up a half step. Next, we're going to use this piston, which is going to push it up another block due to the piston head being inside of the hitbox of the end crystal. And lastly, we're going to use this piston that we just retracted from floor height to push it up the final step. And the reason why we have to bring it up so high is because although it was already poking out a little bit ago, all the explosive rays that deal damage come from the bottom of the center, right about there. And if it isn't completely unearthed from the ground, all the explosive rays will be dampened by the surface that it's sitting in, which is no bueno. We're not going to get any damage out of it. So I've covered the mechanics of how it's going to work, but how does the machine actually work? So I'm actually going to freeze the game here, because what this allows me to do is go look into every single component when it happens, and allow me to describe everything in great detail. So, sculk sensor activates, signified by this button. Tick later, this redstone dust gets broken, and this redstone block gets placed here. I'm not going to explain this section here, because it's kind of convoluted, but I'll describe it in the description if you're curious. Anyways, this redstone line comes on. 2 ticks later, so we're 3 ticks in now, this redstone torch comes off. This piston starts retracting, and this is going to move up this end crystal by half step, which happens in the next 2 ticks, like so. What just happened is since this torch turned off 2 ticks ago, this torch turns on. This piston's going to start extending. It's going to push our end crystal up another couple of blocks. This repeater also just came on, meaning that this redstone line's on, I'll explain that later, and this redstone torch is about to turn off. Let's go 2 ticks later. This redstone torch comes off. This starts pulling this segment out of the way to free way for the dispenser, which was just powered by this redstone line. This dispenser is going to fire 2 ticks later. This repeater actually connects to this piston, which we retracted from the floor in the initial state, but now it's coming back up, which is going to start pushing the end crystal up as so. When this piston's fully extended, our dispenser is activated and the snowball starts flying. And it takes 2 ticks for it to contact the end crystal, and we get into detonation 0.55 seconds after the initial detection, or 11 game ticks. Now let's talk about some other situations. Maybe you want to pop the mine out of a wall or a ceiling, and in that case it's actually significantly easier, because since the explosions are casted out of the base, we can actually just only have to push it once for the ceiling and once for the wall to get it out, as opposed to the 3 times that it takes over there, leading to some very simple designs. Like, I'm talking hilariously simple. These 2 designs compared to that one, it's crazy that they accomplish the same task just in different scenarios. So here, we just push the piston once, it fires a snowball. That's 4 ticks detonation time. It's the same exact situation over here. And I recommend using these designs because number 1, they're so much simpler, and number 2, like 4 tick detonation time, even faster. Maybe you could even catch the running Elytra person. Unfortunately, if you're looking to capture your incredibly highly armored players, if I was wearing this for example, and I ran over one of these mines, if I can find it, that was this much HP here. And unfortunately, even if I was full health, which I wasn't, that's not going to kill me at all. And that same goes for a resistance 2 player. So if you're planning on building someone's base, maybe secretly deactivate their resistance beacon, or just build it in a public area that doesn't have beacons yet. Unfortunately, one of the only flaws is that if you're trying to capture a slightly more armored player, or maybe one with this original setup, just with resistance 2, you're not going to get them. Because if I run over this mine, As you can see, even though that was a very fatal hit, we're not going to die. We're still going to be left with this much health remaining, and maybe you might have a little bit more luck with the resistance to a leecher person, but you're still not going to guarantee a kill. And that's the unfortunate tragic flaw, but I might be able to design a variant that fires a TNT minecart up in the air that detonates as well, causing 2 explosions, which might be the exact amount you need to kill these higher armored players. That's for another day. Anyways, that's the end of this video. I might actually be releasing a tutorial or a litematica file of this project because, well, I'm actually quite proud of it, and it works very well with almost no errors. And the reason I don't normally do that for most of my projects is because, number one, they're poorly designed, and I don't want people trying to error test them because they'll almost always break. Number two, if somebody does break it, I'm kind of liable for trying to help them fix it. And that's not really something I can do when I could have just designed something that doesn't break in the first place. Number three, the designs suck. Why would you want them? And number four, it's just really a whole lot of effort to make tutorials for anything that's larger than something like this. The bunker buster, that would take ages to build without a schematic. Anyways, the tutorial and the litematica should be down in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.